all turn home, the ghost still awaits you. Go on alone. Follow your dream, though it lead to worlds unknown.
Life's but a shadow, once our dreams have flown.
What if men cry, your dream is not our own? Your soul knows the answer, go on alone.
Give life your all, bless everything that's grown.
Fear not the loving, all this world's your own.
Make rich the soil,
But once the seed is sown, seek freedom, don't linger, go on alone. Walk like a man, even though you walk alone. Why court approval once the road is known? Let come who will, but if they all turn home, the ghost still awaits you. Go on alone, go on alone, go on alone.
Vijay, good. So, today I want to highlight one aspect of Master. We all know that he was a avatar, and from the very childhood, he had all the powers of a realized Master. To the extent that there are many stories that in his younger age, even younger days, he raised many dead persons to life. So when I was reading autobiography of a yogi, so one thing struck me. In the very young age, he lost his mother, later on his sister and brother and many other dear ones. So I was wondering why he didn't save them, why he allowed them to go. And one thing I myself just got the answer that maybe he didn't want to interfere with their karmas. So that can be one reason. And one thing struck me, that whenever his near and dear ones like his mother or brother or sister and even his guru, when they left their bodies, he was not near them. He was a little away. He especially came to India in 1935 to be with his guru during his last days. But when Sri Yukteswar had to go, he left for Kumbh Mela. And by the time he came back, Sri Yukteswar had already taken Mahasamadhi. And if you see another incident, when his most advanced disciple, woman disciple, Gyan Mata, when she was about to go, he was there only. And just before her death, he said, okay, let's go for a drive. And he went for a drive, and by the time he came back, Gyan Mata had gone. Then the answer came in the memorial service which he gave for the Gyan Mata. There he mentions that he had an agreement with Divine Mother that she won't take Gyan Mata without his permission. And for 20 years he kept Gyan Mata alive so that she can be realized. And then he added one very significant line. He mentioned that where I am, death cannot come. So there was the answer that why he leaves the place, why he is not present whenever such thing happens, even during his Guru's Mahasamadhi or Gyan Matas or many others. So death could never come near him. And then I wondered, when he left his own body, when he took Mahasamadhi, did death really came to him? But it was something else, he just, okay, let me go now. That's what I want to share today. Thank you.
I want to share a story with you. There was a guru and a chela, and this chela was very young, but still he was a very sincere seeker of God. So once in the guru's ashram, he was trying to meditate very hard. And as we are all familiar with the situation that the harder you try, the more your thoughts get rebellious. So his thoughts were all getting scattered, just like birds in front of a hunter. But despite that, he was trying hard, and suddenly he heard his guru call him. So his thoughts got even more rebellious, and he said, he thought that on one hand my guru tells me to meditate deep, and on the other hand, whenever I am sitting, he gives me a call and he says, do this core and do this task for me. So he refuses to get up. Now the guru again calls him, but again he refuses. The third time the guru calls him, he says, I'm meditating, sir. So now this guru of his is a very wise soul, and he's also got a lot of divine love for his disciple, because that's his favorite chela. So he calls him and he says, I know what you are doing. Your thoughts are just flying here and there, just like leaves in front of a wind. So come here. So when the poor chela goes to the guru tells him, poor boy, the mountains can't give you what you want. Because the guru has this style of speaking which is very precise, and he's a strict disciplinarian. And then the next, I suppose you by now have guessed who the guru and the chela are. Those of you who have read Autobiography of a Yogi know that guru is Yukteswarji and the chela is none else but Yogananda. So he gently strikes him on his chest, and thereafter we all know what happens. The chapter on my experience with cosmic consciousness, and in great detail it is described what is cosmic consciousness, and that chapter is very relishable, because even Upanishads say that God is most relishable. So now all this happens. A few days later, Yogananda goes to his guru and he asks him a question. So if any of you can recall what the question was, it's a very pertinent question that he asks his guru. And he asks him, all this is okay, but when will I find God? So the guru smiles inwardly and he says, the guru has a very precise, Yukteswarji, if you have all read, how he speaks to his chelas, he minces no words, he gives it straight. He says, do you think God is some venerable personage sitting in an aseptic corner of the universe? The joy that you feel, the ecstasy and the bliss that comes to you in meditation, that is your contact with God. So then Yogananda realizes what he was, the experience he was having, but he was not perceiving it. So what do we learn from this experience? This story tells us, first of all, the most important thing is that when we read that Yogananda's thoughts were flying here and there, but still he was so near Samadhi. So it doesn't matter in meditation if you are trying to control your thoughts, but even though your thoughts are flying here and there, that doesn't mean that nothing is happening. Still, you should carry on with the effort. And then our Guru has also written a poem called Samadhi, in which he says that by deeper, longer and Guru-given meditation comes the celestial Samadhi. So the key words here are deeper and longer. For example, if we have some acquaintances, we just nod our head or smile at them once in a while. But if we really wish to make good friends with someone, we give them time and we consciously take out time from our busy schedules and we sit with them, spend more time with them. The same way, in meditation, if you are spending maybe 20 minutes morning, evening, give more time. Once in a while you can meditate for an hour, like once a week or something. Or maybe, if you are meditating 1 hour a day, then go on to 2, go on to 3. Because the more you come in touch with that bliss and that joy, the more devotion you will feel. And the more that devotion, the more you will feel like meditating. So then it becomes a cycle. But in order to start the cycle, we must sit for a longer period of times occasionally. And to sum it up, I would like to read a few of Master's words from the book The Essence of Self-Realization. Ananda ji has written, "Just behind the darkness of closed eyes shines the light of God. When you behold that light in meditation, hold on to it with devotional zeal. Feel yourself inside it. That is where God dwells. If on the other hand, you behold no light in meditation." So our Guru has an answer to everything. If you behold the light, do this. If you do not behold the light, then nothing is lost. Then concentrate at the point between the eyebrows and gaze deeply into the darkness that you see with closed eyes. Try by your devotion to penetrate that thick veil. In time you will surely behold the inner light, for it is ever there, shining in your forehead. Just as all human beings have eyes, so does everyone have this spiritual eye within his forehead. It awaits only his discovery in deep concentration within. So what a lovely promise our Guru has made. Thank you.
Namaste. So today we have a fun subject. How many of you were at the movie last night? Almost everybody. Good, good. So for those who missed it, we went to the Finding Happiness showing at the theater here in Noida. And we almost filled the theater. We didn't quite, but it was close. It was really nice. And of course, if you haven't seen the movie, it's playing all week long. You still have a chance. I thought today it would be fun to talk about the movie and to maybe expand a little bit if you have any questions. Normally we don't go back and forth on Sundays, but this is a very special subject. It was my good fortune to come to Ananda in 1972, and I lived there for many years, and my children grew up in the village. They went to the Ananda schools starting in the 2nd grade. I lived in the village. I lived at the meditation retreat. In fact, there are certain areas, and I lived in almost every one of them at some time over the years. But I also lived outside of the community for some years as well. But my children were there from the 2nd grade until high school. And so in the movie, what is presented is, yes, in the larger scale, the subject is happiness. Seek happiness, find how to find happiness. And in the end, Swamiji says, don't live to be unhappy, live to be happy. Don't accept unhappiness. Don't assume that life can't get any better. When I came to Ananda, I was very much pretty disgusted with American society. And I would say the whole world. The whole idea that happiness is found outside of the self. That happiness comes from what people are generally doing. It doesn't. Because most people are not generally very happy. And when I came to Ananda, I found a group of people that were happy. And they were poor. And so that, the more money you have, the happier you are. It's not true. And studies have been done on it. It's just simply not true. You're not more likely to be happy if you're wealthy. And in fact, suicide rates are just as high in the wealthy as they are in the poor. So many of the values that most of us grew up with simply were not the truth. And as the story tells, Kriyanandaji was seeking truth. He was wanting to know, what is the reality of life? What is really going on here? And of course, when he read the autobiography of Yogi, finally he found someone who he believed knew what was going on. And of course, most of us had the same experience. We read Autobiography of a Yogi, and we got that there's something communicated here, not only information, but an incredible inspiration. And this is really what Ananda has been all these years, is a place of information about how to go inside and be happy, but inspiration to do it. Inspiration, the environment, as Yoganandaji said, environment is stronger than willpower. And Kriyanandaji was hoping to create an environment that would encourage, support, and expand spiritual effort. And now, of course, we have this film that has footage from a period of over 40 years. And the schools have been going for almost that full time. And so we really have a history. And I was a little, when I see the movie, it looks like home movies to me. I mean, it's the nicest home movie you ever saw. but it's all my friends that I grew up with spiritually. Starting from teepees and outhouses and no running water, no telephones, and only dirt roads, and everybody being just barely above the poverty line economically, to what the village is today, which is, it's gorgeous, it's beautiful. What about that home that, I forget his name, but the gardener, the Vastu home? Oh my goodness, it's like a palace. I mean, I don't mean overly done, but I mean so well designed, so beautifully done. It's very nice. So let me ask you, any areas in the film that, yes?
Going back after seeing the movie, Ayush was with me. He's 14 years old. So he asked me a question. He asked me, with Ananda's style of teaching, the way they run their schools, will they be still compatible? Can they compete in the outside world when they grow up?
Okay.
The cutthroat competition which is there.
So Mr. Gupta's son Ayush has asked him on the way home from the movie, with our schools and emphasis on self-development, how do the kids do in general society, as far as cutthroat society, and can they make it in outside of Ananda? Well, the fact is that our students are rated very high academically. Most of them have scored in 90% percentile academically on national tests, and many of them have gone on to university and done well. And as it pointed out in the movie, one of the things that, because I've had this conversation with my kids, my son went to the University of Seattle, and my daughter went to the University of Puget Sound. They both graduated. My daughter's now a veterinarian. So she got a good enough education to go get into veterinary school. But even they commented. It was interesting to me when I asked my kids, now, here they're in their early 30s now. So twins, son and daughter. And so, what did you think of your education? And how did you feel that you fit in with the other kids? And they said that, that they didn't have trouble fitting in, except that they realized that they didn't always want to fit in. I think one of the Kretzmann's boys in the movie pointed this out, that they realized that their education upbringing had been different, and it gave them insight into the motives of others that most of the other kids didn't get. We've seen that the students from the Ananda schools are very self-confident but humble at the same time. That balance, they can stand up for themselves, but they don't have to. They don't feel that they need to. They're not bossy. And of course, any any body of people, there's going to be a range. Not all of the people, the kids who grew up at Ananda have stayed in the village. Some have moved away. And in the movie, the Kretzmann kids live there, and there are a number of kids. Akia, who's one of the teachers in the school, she grew up at Ananda. My kids don't live at Ananda. They feel comfortable with Ananda culture, but and they're spiritual, but they're not organizational. They're more independent. And as a parent, of course, you have to accept that. And I think it's another interesting thing about Ananda culture is and the Kretzmanns, Mary Kretzmann pointed this out, she never felt that it was her responsibility to impose our beliefs on our children. We want to share our values with them, and just by the very environment in which they grow up, they got it. But they themselves have to determine what they want to do with that information. And that is very much respected in Ananda. There's many religions where if you don't accept the religion of your parents and follow it the way they want you to follow it, then they won't even talk to you. That's extreme, but I know there are plenty of situations like that. Even in the village, when the parents get elderly, and in our case, parents who were not, in most cases, devotees, but as long as they respect the community and our ways and don't cause any kind of disturbance, they're welcome to retire in our group and live out with their family. Ananda's always been a very open society. Basically, it don't cause a problem. Nobody has a problem. And we don't go around bossing people around all the time. Any other comments, questions?
My son, he's a teenager and he's very sporty. But on days when he doesn't get to do sports, he gets very restless. So one day I suggested to him, he was himself acknowledging that he's feeling restless. So I suggested that he could meditate. He said, not a single boy meditates. Anyone I know of. So how can, it was his very, the question was very valid.
So Meenakshi's son is saying that when he stays home restless, he doesn't know what to do with himself. And she's suggesting, well, why don't you just go meditate? He's saying, I don't know anybody who meditates. And also, if you're restless and you haven't trained in meditation, you won't be able to sit still. So, and of course, in the movie, we saw that even at a young age, the students are given, some amount, but it's not long. I mean, they're not forced into long meditations. But of course, the environment's stronger than willpower. And once you learn to do it, even if you put it on the shelf for some time, and when you get older, you can bring it off the shelf and dust it off. So, I had this very same problem when I got out of high school and was trying to find myself. And I did some traveling after high school, and eventually I ended up in a university. I traveled that summer, and I read Autobiography of a Yogi, and I started taking the lessons and began meditating, and I didn't know anybody else who was into meditation. And then I went to a year of university, and of course nobody there was into meditation. And then I found Ananda, where everyone was into meditation. And so then I just gave up on college and went to what I call the University of Ananda, and Swami Kriyananda was my professor, and I found that to be the best school for me. So the key here, and the challenge for parents who don't have, their children don't have other children who are meditating, it's extremely difficult. And you really, and we as a Sangha have a growing responsibility to try to create more environments for this. We can put on youth camps, we can have a youth retreat, we can have, of course, encouraging them to come even to service. But environment is stronger than will. You cannot expect your children to do these things unless they have an interest driven from, you know, a previous incarnation, and it's strong. But you have to consider that if you're a yogi and they're in your life, your yogic influence on them is their karma. So you've got to impress upon them vibrationally. Now you have to remember that calmness in life is not just an issue of meditation. It's the totality. It's, you know, the internet and television and movies and the books that you read and all the activities that you do. And of course, physical activity is really important for most people, but for young people in particular. And so what we need to do, and the Ananda schools has it, and the Ananda culture has activities that bring about a calmness during activity, so that you don't become overexcited even though you're doing something that's quite active. So for example, when we have sports, we emphasize, we do compete very strongly, but we emphasize it in a cooperative way, in a caring way. So there's a great, my daughter was on the Little League baseball team. They have the women, the girls teams and the boys teams. It seems to me they had because sometimes the girls play on the boys' side, but they also have the girls only. And so she was on the baseball team for, I think it was either 2 or 3 years, I forget. But it was, I think it was the first year or two, they never won one game. I mean, not one. But it was interesting, in America, many of the parents have behaved very badly. And the children learn how to do it too, so they make fun of others who aren't very good at what they're doing. So the other baseball teams, when they played our girls, the Ananda girls, I think they were the Ananda Angels, which was a nice name. And they would laugh at them. But our girls, when the other team scored, they would clap. They would say, "Wow, you good game, a good hit, a good, you know." Even when they got them out, if they made a good catch, they'd say, "Good job." Well, and again, I forget whether it was 1 or 2 seasons where they didn't win a game, and then the next year, they were the champions of the year, and but they never changed from being caring about the other team. And even though they started winning, if the other team made a good hit or whatever, they would praise it. And with that consciousness, it's just so completely different than everybody, you know, bullying and being just very negative. So that's the key. And to recognize that when you grow up in an environment of calm caring, you know, there's this saying, I think it's from Africa, that it takes a village to raise a child. And in the movie, again, one of the Kretzmann sons, I forget his first name, pointed this out, that the whole village, I think it was Peter, the whole village was our family. And so you never had to worry about the kids, you know, being anything but supported by the people that they were around. And it creates just a fabulous supportive environment. And the kids, we have a number of great musicians, and just, I mean, basically they grow up knowing that they can do anything they go after. And so it's a very positive environment. Anyone else?
My question is that since Wednesday, I heard the news that the movie is at 8:30. I'm very happy. I'm very, very happy. So is it okay at the point of the movies as a movie? Should one be in that much of happiness and joy?
Oh, okay. So Surabhi's daughter has expressed happiness that the movie is going to come out. And this is something that is so key to understanding what it is that the Masters are teaching us on planet Earth at this time. Most of us have grown up with happiness equals doing something that you enjoy. And unhappiness is when life isn't something that you enjoy. So your sense of well-being is driven by how life goes on the outside. So when things go well, I'm happy. When things aren't going well, I'm not happy. When I'm excited about something that I am enthusiastic to do, I'm happy. When I'm not excited about it, when I'm depressed about it, then I'm not happy. So everything in life, according to the way I was taught when I was growing up, is driven by what happens outside in life. And yet, we all know, I love this, we all know where can happiness be found? Inside. Everybody knows that. And yet, most people look for it outside. So then the question comes, okay, but it's natural. Just because you become a yogi doesn't mean you stop having any emotional feelings. So should a yogi get happy and sad? Well, let's think about it. Earlier we had the mention of Sister Ganamata, Master's foremost woman disciple. Okay, so when she passed, Yoganandaji said, I saw her go into the watchful state. She merged completely with infinite spirit beyond the creation. She was one with God, completely without any limit. And and of course, he was an avatar. He was one with God. And yet when she passed, he cried. And certainly he could laugh. Master told jokes all the time. And Kriyanandaji said he'd have them rolling in the aisles. And he could get excited about little things that they were doing. But there's a real difference. When we laugh, this is something that I learned from Kriyanandaji and loved, is that Yoganandaji and Kriyananda said, when I watched him laugh, I looked into his eyes, I saw only infinite spirit. It was like looking into the cosmos. And he was never touched. His consciousness manifested through those emotions, but those emotions represented only a very small part of his awareness. The much greater part of his awareness was in the bliss, the peace, the love of spirit. So now our circumstance is that our emotions represent the big part, and our ability to perceive God's peace is only small. But it's the same thing, it's just a question of degrees. So anytime you feel happy, it's connected to God's happiness. But the more we let it flow into our emotional consciousness, outwardness, then it represents a limiting of that happiness. So Swamiji used to laugh with the joy of God. So we experience all of life. We experience life with the joy of God. We experience life with the challenges, with the sorrow of God. You know, as God comes into the world, there's duality, positive and negative. So God is joy, but God is also compassion. And but once you experience compassion, if you let compassion, caring about others, go into negative emotions, it doesn't do anybody any good. But if it's dispassion, it's rooted in spirit. It's rooted in the understanding that life is a play, and there are villains, and there are heroes, and then there's all the nobodies, or the little bodies, the most peoples. And they seem like they don't matter. But if you ever have seen a great movie, they have tons of extras, all the extras. you don't have great movies without extras. All the people in the middle. You can't have rich people and poor people. You also have to have a middle class. And this is the way life is. So as we grow spiritually, our enthusiasms will be rooted more and more in peacefulness. And we say, be centered. So you can go like this, or you can go like this, but you don't want those emotions to drive your sense of well-being. And when you have that connectedness to spirit, then you can be even-minded, as it says in the Bhagavad Gita, to be even-minded and cheerful. This is really what we become. And that cheerfulness is not ha 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 ha. It's calm, it's centered. And but each and every one of us, we have buttons. Our own special buttons are I'm excited about that button, and I'm not excited, I'm depressed about that button. And we learn to be aware of ourselves and gradually to not let those buttons control us. Recognize that Master was a very exuberant personality, Sruteshwar was not. And when Master became associated with Sruteshwar, he didn't become unexuberant. No, he stayed the same, but he was more a better Yogananda rather than becoming a Sruteshwar. And each and every one of us has a unique expression. Our personalities are unique. But what we do is when we pull them out of the ego personality and connect them to spirit, we become a higher expression of spirit flowing through this form. And this you see in the Ananda culture and community. You see a wide variance in the way that people live. Of course, you saw from the old pictures over time, you saw how the way everybody looked changed, what we dressed changed, and there was evolution, natural evolution. And Swamiji evolved. This is one of my favorite subjects. Is over the years I've observed how Swamiji, the way that underneath it was the same, but the way that he manifested his personality evolved over the years. And it was wonderful to see, and a great message to us that it is not that we're supposed to suppress our emotions. We're to bring them, our consciousness connected to this higher potential, and then raise our emotions to a beautiful expression of that higher potential. Swamiji was moved to tears in the movie. 20 years ago, he never would have cried. He would have thought, yogis don't cry. Remember, I talked about this one Sunday. Do yogis cry? It's this understanding that as you mature as a disciple, in the beginning, in anything you're learning, you have to be disciplined. And you kind of cut everything out. But once you've learned how to do something new, you can relax and do it in a more natural way. So it's natural that when we become yogis, we would kind of push our emotions away a little bit. Because they've been controlling us. We have to take back control over them. But once we learn to control them, then we can relax a little bit. And what happens is that because you feel calmer, they're not being energized in the way that they used to be. So this is a natural part of, and again, this is a more important spiritual transformation for each of us than visions and all the things all the kind of flashing lights and powers. The greatest power in the spiritual life is the transformation from us being emotionally bound to ups and downs to being even-minded and cheerful and experiencing ever deeper levels of our conscious connection to infinite spirit. And the way that it fills your life with well-being, this is the greatest gift for us. Anything else?
Yeah, one thing I couldn't understand, when they were visiting the farm, the person who was looking after the farm, he said that we talk to the plants and the plants choose their own space. I couldn't get how the plant can choose their own space.
Okay, during the gardening part of the film, they were talking about, they were talking about talking to plants, which of course to the average person, what are you, crazy? And then and the other was that the plants choose their own spot. You know, we've all grown up with such definite views on this is right and that is wrong, and if it's right, everything else is crazy. But science proves every year that it was wrong about many things, that it thought were absolutely correct. And so the talking to the plants comes from as far back as in Autobiography of a Yogi, Dr. Bose Tulsi. Yeah. So he discovered, scientifically tested the plants, that they reacted to the emotions of the people when they came into the room. The tomato experiment, and the plant reacted, or the flower, forget, but the person came in with angry, I'm gonna kill you energy for the plant, and they measured the plant's response. And then a person came in, and it was they were calm and loving. And of course, it's been known. There's a well-known book in America called The Secret Life of Plants, and they play different kinds of music, and the loud, heavy metal music, and the plants would shrink, and the nice Bach classical music, they would be very robust. This is a case of anybody who has kept up with scientific thought knows that this is true, that our thoughts and emotions affect the plants. And there was a place in Scotland, the very north of Scotland, called Findhorn in the 70s, where we visited. And they had a garden, even in the winter, and there was snow on the ground, and they had roses blooming. And they talked about communing with the devas, the plant devas. And there's so much understanding about how life works sort of on the other side of the perceptions of the human body, that some of it is imaginary, but some of it is very real. Of course, Sri Teshwar's discussion of the astral realms is one of the most reliable discussions. But Yoganandaji was visited Luther Burbank in America, and he was the one who talked to the cactus and convinced it to stop having spines. Yeah. So he was the one who really, as far as even in America, pioneered the idea that you could talk to plants and that they would react to the stimulus that you were trying to give to them. Now, the idea that the plants choose their own spot, of course, in the end of the 1800s in America, there was an industrialist who became quite famous, and his name was Henry Ford, and he made the first affordable car. And the way that he did it was to create the assembly line, and that simplified the process. And so that basic process took over everything. That's taken over the world, the whole idea that everything should be the same. And of course there's many pluses to that, but you can take it too far. And so now what you find in agriculture is that process went so far that they completely lost track of the very real value of life force and natural nature. So they began to impose on nature very straight rows, pesticides, genetic changing of the plant structure itself. All of these things, man is trying to impose itself. Well, of course, if you're talking to the plants, you're in a certain way imposing on them. But relationships where one side is imposing on the other become imbalanced. And this is the idea when you talk about taking gardening to a whole nother level, where you recognize that there is a natural, that nature has a way of doing things. The forest didn't need mankind's efforts to make it so. And every environment on the planet has creatures that live in harmony with it and manage to feed themselves even when it's a desert. They find water or ways to survive. And even in the coldest environments, there are life can live in harmony with itself in a wide variety of environments. So there isn't just one way to do that. There were pictures in the movie where there were some roads, but they certainly had a large area where they were doing this combined farming where everything fit together. I haven't done that myself, so my guess is that they, throw the seeds out. I don't really know the detail of that, but the point that they're making is that instead of creating an environment that takes, they're talking about creating an environment that gets nicer and nicer, richer and richer. And they're talking about creating a soil that will feed their grandchildren and their grandchildren's grandchildren, rather than what we had in America was the Dust Bowl, the cornfields, and much of the production areas have had during a drought, and then everything is just blown away. There's no topsoil anymore. And then, of course, they try to stimulate growth with fertilizers. And so it's all about, and there's no end to this type of evolution. I guarantee you in 10 or 20 or 30 years, the ideas that they use in the garden today will continue to become more refined and understood. And their ability to communicate and guide from an underneath energy point of view will continue to develop. And this is something that Kriyanajiti talked about. We always assume, because our society is technologically based, that the future, that all great advancement looks technological. Swamiji talked about the idea that in the previous Satya Yuga, instead of being technologically based so much, for example, how about the idea that you could go out into the forest and because of your consciousness, bugs wouldn't bother you and the weather would be nice. So you didn't need a big, huge structure. You could live close to nature without needing to impose upon it and separate yourself from it. So that higher consciousness allowed you to live in more harmony with nature and enjoy it more without the need for technological separation. And that is a type of evolution that I don't think that's the case in all circumstances. But the point being that evolution is not just about technology. It's about our ability to consciously express ever new spirit. Remember, spirit is ever new. And the technologies of the past that have been lost will come again, but they'll come again in a different form. They'll look a little bit different. That ever newness is one of the basic attributes of spirit. This is why we say God is Satchidananda, ever existing, ever conscious, ever new. Okay, that's last one. Oh, we have two. Okay, quick.
Well, are our thoughts and activity going to lead us to this creation of this kind of community, or we need more energy?
This is what I like to hear, a man of action. and I had been meaning to bring this up. This movie presents a vision of how the world can be changed. And we all have a choice to make about our personal participation in it. I have to admit, when I came to Ananda, I had no thought of changing the world. I was mainly interested in changing this guy, because this guy wasn't very happy. And I found an environment that supported me becoming more happy. But I discovered unexpectedly that the basis of that environment is that it had to include others. Anandaji initially was just bought land for a private retreat. I have to say, he's talked both sides of the fence on this, because personally, he's always talked about wanting to live in seclusion and just let the world take care of itself. And then on the other side, he's always had this interest in sharing. And of course, he made this commitment to Master to help grow the work. But after he got kicked out of SRF, he had a period of years where he didn't know how to do what he felt Master had given him the job. But from the very beginning, and Davey mentions this in the movie, that Ananda has never turned in. Even in our most challenging times financially and the fire and everything, Ananda has always looked out, always cared about others, tried to reach others. This is really an essential, and of course, look at what that has produced. We wouldn't be standing here today, probably, if all of those things hadn't happened to evolve to where now Ananda's in India and doing all the things that are happening. I tell you, it's so exciting. When we would sometimes sit around in the 70s and try to imagine what Ananda would be in 40 years. And in fact, I said this last night to Shivani. I said, we were walking into the theater down that really narrow hall, and I'm like, Shivani, could we ever have imagined this? We're in India, where the movie's premiering, and all of this history and accomplishment has happened. And we just shook our heads, no, we never could have imagined that this is what it would look like. So we all have to choose, what are we going to do with this? Are we interested in expanding the light, sharing this? And trust me, we are. Spiritual community is essential for us. You want your son to meditate? Build a community. Let him be in that environment. If he just seen you do it, he thinks it's just good for you. But when he sees everybody doing it, and then he finds a friend his age that's doing it, he becomes encouraged. And in fact, I'm going to be going to, his school's not the same.
No, I used to.
Same, okay, I'm going to speak in a school next week, but it's not your son's school. So you should have them invite me. Then we'll start a meditation group there and get those kids meditating. Last one.
Yes, after seeing that movie yesterday, there could be many people who would be inclined to go there and at Ananda, US. Is there any precondition how to go there, and what would
So a person who saw the movie might be interested in visiting the village, and guests are always welcome. We have the Expanding Light Retreats, where there's a wide variety of programs. You can come for the day, you can come for a week, a month, a year, a lifetime. Yeah, you never know. Oh, to live? You're asking, what does it take to live in the village? Residents in any of the communities, whether it be one of the urban communities or the village, they all have their own certain things that are standards that are only theirs, and some that are the same. Most of them, I suppose, are the same. To be a permanent resident, not just a guest, you have to be a disciple of Paramahansa Yogananda. And except if you're an elder of a resident. Or we've even had cases where maybe a brother or a sister who wasn't a devotee, but they were ill or something and they came to stay for an extended time. All of those kinds of situations are accommodated. But to become a resident member, we have it is a whole process. There's a membership committee, there is a whole series, a membership training series, and a discipleship course, so that people really can learn what you have to go from, wow, this is a great idea, to understanding a little about the details, and then kind of getting into the practical reality of it. And so it's about a year-long process. And the thing to do is to, you go and you visit. And when you find a place that feels like home to you, well, then you might want to consider staying. But I believe that we can do that here as well. And I hope that we will grow towards creating a more community environment where we live closer together, and then eventually to have property of our own and schools and everything. It's very exciting. I've been talking to my landlord, the flat that I'm in, and he's interested in starting a school based on the Ananda system. And unfortunately, he lives in Dehradun. But I think anything that we do to support this type of education in India, if we can get it started and then help it to spread, that will really have a fantastic potential here. Okay, so Om. And please don't forget, the movie is there through Thursday night. So if you have any more friends you want to take and see it, there's more opportunity, and we won't know until the end of the week whether it's going to be held over for another week. Okay, let's have Arati.